Morning, and thank you for joining us as Upper Darby School District hosts a press conference on public education school funding. Joining us today to discuss this most important topic is, of course, Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Daniel P. McGarry for Upper Darby School District. We have also with us Dr. Eric Becotes, Superintendent of William Penn School District. We have Mr. Christopher Dormer, Superintendent of Norristown Area School District. Dr. Maria Edelberg, Executive Director of Delaware County Intermediate Unit. State Representative Gina H. Curry. And joining us soon would be State Representative Heather Boyd. Lastly, we have our President of the School Board of Directors for the Upper Darby School District. We are going to get underway to discuss this most important topic. Thank you for your attention.
So good morning, everyone. I just want to recognize some important people in the room that are not just on this dais with us today, but I know that we have our UDEA leadership here in the room, Mr. Castertano, Ms. Fox, thank you so much for being here, representing the head of our unions here in Upper Darby. Also, I understand William Penn School District leadership for the teachers union is here as well, so thank you for joining us. We also have some school board members here from the Upper Darby School District that are present in the room today, Ms. Kimberly Glenn, Mr. Des Noyers, Ms. Mitchell, and from William Penn, Ms. Huff. Thank you so much for coming out to advocate. They cut my mic already, I think. And then, in this room also is our former board president, who's our mayor, who's a strong, staunch advocate. I think much of what we're going to talk about today are the relationships that exist here in our community and in William Penn, I'm sure in Norristown, that there are local leaders advocating for the funding of our schools and how important that conversation is. So I just want to express my gratitude for all of you for being here today to support us, the administrators, the teachers, the families, the press for covering this, and my colleagues that are with me here today, and our board president, Mr. Don Fields, who's penning away next to me feverishly with his pen. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. I'd like to begin my comments, especially this morning, by thanking Representative Curry for being here with us. Representative Curry has been advocating as long as anybody else in this room, both as a former Upper Darby School Board member, as well as now a state representative. So I appreciate your advocacy. And Ms. Boyd, who will get here, hopefully she's reading, I think, at a local event, has been a former school board member here in the Upper Darby School District, now a state representative. We're both very lucky to have Representative Curry and Boyd here in our communities supporting the advocacy of funding in public education. So I appreciate, as both former board members and now state reps, what you do here for our communities in William Penn and the Upper Darby School District. I just received a note that another board member from William Penn, Mr. Wright, thank you for being here. So let me start off by saying that I'm the proud superintendent of the Upper Darby School District, and I've been in the business, because it's become a business, of advocating for funding, equitable funding, and adequate funding for the Upper Darby School District and districts that are similar to ours for over 14 years. For over 14 years of having these conversations. And I'm certainly proud to say that I've advocated for funding of public schools on the behalf of the district I serve. But I often leave these meetings, these opportunities, a little cynical, wondering if those who are fighting against the proper funding of public education really recognize the services that we provide the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And as we pointed out earlier today, I'm joined by an unbelievable list of representatives here that Ms. Buford recommended to you this morning and shared with you this morning. And following this today, there are other superintendents watching this live stream event. We have decided as a group to not overlap one another, and we'll break down the topics we'd like to cover with you today and the need for funding. We're here because Governor Shapiro announced a proposed budget of increasing basic education funding in the Commonwealth by $1.1 billion. Here in the Upper Darby School District, that means we could see an increase of $16 million that we deserve. $16 million that would provide relief to the burden of our local taxpayers, improve our facilities, and provide an opportunity for us to compensate our staff and recruit teachers to this profession. We're going to cover facilities, teacher recruitment, and student-teacher stipends, educational opportunities and extracurricular after-school opportunities and dual enrollment, the need for school safety, mental health, special education, charter and cyber school reform needs, early childhood learning, and career and technical education support. I'm going to kick off my comments this morning with some basic and fundamental facts for the school districts represented in the room today and my colleagues who are members of the Pennsylvania League of Urban Superintendents, known as the PLUS Caucus, and Mr. Dormer is the president of our PLUS League of Urban Superintendents. Here are some facts. The state and federal mandates have increased, as have the needs of the students and families we serve. Yet these same expectations and same mandates that are pushed into our schools and our classrooms and our communities every single day are not met with the same level of support and state or federal aid. Let me share some interesting facts that have changed over the last 5 to 10 years. This is not an exhaustive list, but these have increased our costs. The rating of our schools has changed from adequate yearly progress to the school performance profile to the Ready Future Index. With every new report card or school rating change, there have been an increase in funding mandates. And I believe that very few people, wherever I go, wherever I testify, are able to articulate the intricate differences between and among the acronyms I just shared with you. I'm left with asking, what purpose do these rating systems serve, if not only to further highlight how funding directly relates to student achievement? Charter school costs and funding has changed over the last 10 to 15 years. At one time, there was a reimbursement process. Now there is no longer a reimbursement process. The standards have changed for instruction from the PA legacy standards to the PA core standards. Corrective action to CSI, to ATSI, to TSI. If I ask people what they mean and how schools are rated, most people can't explain it. Corrective action was around under the No Child Left Behind. We simply switched the terminology and the rating of our schools, and the funding and the demands are not met the same. Act 82 to Act 13, how we evaluate our teachers and our staff. Keystone exams to Act 158, the multiple pathways to graduation. The teacher certification systems have changed. We now do threat assessments. We are responsible for Title IX investigations, homelessness, foster care, exit criteria for EL students, trauma-informed care, safe to say something, flexible instructional days, Act 80, Act 44, Act 55. Now we're educating students until they're 22. A decision passed after the start of a new school year this year, and here in Upper Darby, could have cost $700,000 and at minimum a 1% increase in taxes after we already passed our budget. This decision was made in late August. Potential mandating of full-day kindergarten and perhaps full-day programming for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, not to mention a national teacher shortage and an increase in emergency certified staff. And how could we forget COVID-19 and the push to provide several different types of instructional models, one-to-one technology, internet access, the changing of the work environment, and now significant resources to help students and staff with attendance and mental health. I would argue that we are operating some of the most complex organizations in this country, and we are expected to meet every new regulation and mandate without the proper funding and support. There comes a point in time, and I think we are beyond that, when you have to really recognize the value and importance of public schools in the Commonwealth. For my comments this morning, I'm not going to go through every one of those mandates that I just listed to you. But I am going to share with you that we are in the Upper Darby School District, a district that represents and supports close to 13,000 students who represent over 90 different languages. We operate 13 schools. Some of our schools are 85 years old. Our youngest school is 51 years old. The older facilities we have were not designed to meet current educational requirements for not only the academic standards, but also current safety standards. It becomes even more apparent and obvious in our schools that we are overcrowded. I've listened to the last couple of rounds of hearings and testimony, and I appreciate Representative Curry asking questions, supporting, advocating for funding in Upper Darby and William Penn. What I'm left with when I watch these hearings is I find myself yelling at the computer while I'm at work listening to the hearings. I listen to what I would argue are some misguided and maybe need to meet with us as superintendents, asking questions to the Pennsylvania Department of Education about why do you need this money? And if some school district is getting higher test scores and they have lower tax increases, and I've heard this from community members, well, how can they do it? How can they do it with less? Well, if you compare the demographics, the federal mandates and the state mandates, nobody in this room that's an educator, nobody in this room that's a taxpayer, and nobody in this room that is a superintendent forced those costs. I'll give you an example. We have grown as a school district since 2007, 2008, from 570 English learners to 2,100 English learners. There are state and federal requirements of testing and achievement, exit criteria. There are also federal and state requirements of the type of educational background, certification, and teachers that are required to provide direct instruction to students in need of English language support. There is a cost associated with being a very diverse school district, like the superintendents that are with me today, that are advocating for this funding. That is not because the taxpayers, should not be the fault of the taxpayer, it's not the fault of the students, it's the reality of federal and state requirements to provide supports to these children. Again, our population is growing at over 8% and close to 200 students a year. How about autistic support and the need for space? We are growing by 15 to 20 students in autistic support, in need of autistic support in the Upper Darby School District on a yearly basis. Just last month, we had to have a conversation about reconfiguring our schools again. For every 6 to 8 students that enter your school in need of autistic support, you need a classroom space and at least 3 educational supports, including a classroom teacher, a teacher's aide, and additional paraprofessional support in a classroom to provide autistic support students with their needs. We have over $200 million in facilities needs here in the Upper Darby School District. That should not rest solely on the local taxpayers here of the Upper Darby School District. At one time, there was PlanCon dollars. PlanCon no longer exists. We're embarking on a new school facility here in Upper Darby. Could have realized close to $30 million in savings and reimbursement on that project. We now know that there is some money, about $300 million in the proposed budget, to provide some offset costs in the funding and the needs of improvements in our schools. Why argue against that? There's an article that recently came out in the United States of America. 50% of the schools in the country are half a century old. They are just as important as roads and bridges and highways. Schools should be treated just like the infrastructural improvements and needs that exist, and it should not just fall on local taxpayers to improve those school facilities. When I listen to these legislators ask questions of educators at hearings, I can recognize how complex it is to answer those questions. Education is very complex. We, the educators, did not make it that complex. It's become complex in an area outside of the schools and that we lead. These mandates have an impact on teaching and learning. In the proposed budget, there's a need for recruitment and teacher into the profession. Those of us in the room that became teachers, we had to pay to student teach. I support wholeheartedly the concept of paying student teachers to get them into this profession. There is a crisis. There is a crisis in the Commonwealth. In 2013, in-state instructional certificates were at 16,614. In 21-22, there were 4,200 certified teachers coming out, and it's decreasing. Here in Upper Darby School District, we have 57 emergency certified teachers. We have to stop the crisis, pay teachers better, and encourage teachers to get into this profession. How does this relate to extracurricular opportunities for kids? So we have the needs of our students before and after school, how that impacts staffing, how that impacts our facilities and our classroom spaces, as well as extracurricular opportunities that are provided. Our teachers are not able to stay after school to run clubs as much as we'd like them to, or provide tutoring opportunities because our teachers are having to work second and third jobs. If we were to increase after-school opportunities, increase student behavior and opportunities in our communities, we have to provide opportunities and fund those opportunities here locally for our teachers and our staffs to encourage them to focus on one career, the profession of education. I have been going around to every single home and school in this district, 13 different individual home and schools. I have a list of letters, of advocacy letters from parents, from teachers who have talked about the need to fund and support our band program, how important it is for those kids to have those opportunities, for our teachers in their classrooms who want to do after-school opportunities for kids, for accessible access, ADA ramps, doorway openings, bathroom facility changes, significant, much-needed natural increases to the funding would let this happen in Upper Darby School District. I think I speak for the other urban superintendents in the area. We are not looking to go out and chase after the latest and greatest. We need space, we need teachers, and we should get these provided to us so that we can provide the most important educational opportunities to this community. It's hard to argue against the fact that we provide in this country probably the most foundational, important resource of any other resource that exists. It should be funded. It's gone far too long, and you become cynical leaving these meetings thinking whether or not it's going to happen. Now is the time. I'm going to turn my comments over to Dr. Eric B. Coates, who is joining me from the William Penn School District. I'm sure he's going to echo many of the same and talk about mental health and other teacher recruitment issues. Eric?
Thank you, Dr. McGarrett. Good morning, honorable legislators, elected officials, members of the press, and fellow educators. In 2014, the William Penn School District was one of the lead plaintiffs that filed a lawsuit against legislative leaders, state education officials, and the governor at that time that said that the funding of school districts was unconstitutional. Our voices and stories were heard. In 2023, the judge ruled that the current system of educational funding in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. We have waited 10 years for this ruling, and yet today we are still standing, although we're sitting, and fighting to ensure that our students get what they rightfully deserve, an adequate funding for basic education. There is hope that the recommendation of the Basic Education Funding Commission and Governor Shapiro's proposed budget will chart a new historic course for our schools. This can only be accomplished, though, if our state legislators pass this budget in full and complete form. It is imperative for our students, our teachers, and our staff, and our families, and our communities. We can no longer get by with less or do more with less. I want to share with you the impact the proposed budget will have in three crucial areas: school safety and security, mental health, and teacher recruitment. As most of us know, school safety and security is the foundation for creating an atmosphere that is conducive to learning. With the proposed budget, we anticipate significant enhancements in our ability to implement state-of-the-art security measures, including surveillance systems, alarm systems, access control techniques, and emergency response protocols. In the William Penn School District, none of our elementary schools have adequate surveillance systems. At the secondary level, the systems are not fully functional. The additional funds will allow us to, over time, increase the security and safety systems in our schools. School safety, though, also requires that you have people. We currently employ school safety officers, as they help set a positive tone and culture in our buildings, as well as provide essential support during emergencies. Our current ratio of school support officers to students is 1 to 140. That is inadequate. The proposed budget would help us increase the salary of our SSOs to a living wage, as well as employ more school support officers. These men and women do so much more for our schools, students, and families, and we need to compensate them fairly. Investments in school security would not only fortify our school campuses, but also provide peace of mind to parents and guardians, knowing that their children are learning in a secure environment. But safety goes beyond the physical infrastructure, as it also encompasses the mental well-being of our students. Mental health, as most of us know, has emerged as a pressing concern in today's educational landscape, exacerbated by the challenges posed by the pandemic. With the proposed budget, we have an opportunity to bolster our mental health support services, ensuring that every student has access to counseling, therapy, and other resources they need to thrive academically and emotionally. We're not able to meet currently the mental, emotional, and physical health of all of our students. We have to supplement our services with outside agencies, and we do not know if these services will be provided year to year as we have to wait on the legislature to adopt a budget. These supports make a huge difference at all of our schools, and funding is needed to support our students. Currently, we have 3 social workers in our district to support approximately 4,700 students. That's a ratio of 1 to 1,566. We have 2 student assistant practitioners, so that's a ratio of 1 to 2,350 students. Our students deserve better. Lastly, I want to address the critical issue of teacher recruitment. Attracting and retaining talented educators is essential for delivering high-quality education to our students, yet we face challenges in attracting qualified teachers, especially in high-demand subject areas such as special education, math, and science. With the current proposed budget, we anticipate increasing funding for teacher recruitment initiatives such as competitive salaries and professional development opportunities. We currently have 47 vacancies, 89% of them having a direct impact on classroom instruction. When we conduct exit interviews, and I will state that several of our teachers have left since being hired at the beginning of the year, the number one reason they state to us is because of the salary. Our teachers deserve better. I take great pride in having served as the superintendent of the William Penn School District for the last 4 years and supporting our community. As I have said time and time again, our students, our teachers, and our staff and our community deserve fully funded schools. No more promises. The opportunity is here. The time is now. We will no longer stand by doing more with less. In closing, though, I do want to express my gratitude to my colleague, Dr. McGarry, but more importantly to the William Penn School Board for their advocacy and foresight to move forward with the lawsuit. They have laid the foundation for where we are as a state today. Our governor, yes, he's taken the first step, but it is now up to our legislature. As we move forward, let us remain steadfast in our dedication to the principles of fairness, opportunity, and excellence in education. Together, we can build a brighter future for all of our students, our communities, and our state. On behalf of the William Penn School District and the Board of School Directors, we will do everything in our power to continue fighting not only for our students, but for all of the students in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christopher Dormer. I'm very proud to serve as the superintendent of schools at the Lansdowne Area School District. And as Dr. McGarry indicated earlier, I'm also proud to serve as the president of the PLUS Caucus of PASA, the Pennsylvania League of Urban Schools. PLUS represents 30 school districts across the Commonwealth and over 300,000 students who attend urban schools in Pennsylvania. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be back here in Upper Darby today. My home for 13 years as a teacher, a coach, an athletic director, an assistant principal, and the principal of the castle up the hill there, Upper Darby High School. I'm thankful to Dr. McGarry's invitation to attend today and to give me good reason to bust out my purple. As a school superintendent of an underserved and underfunded urban school district, I can unequivocally say funding does matter. Often I engage in conversations with legislators on the challenges we have as superintendents in our school districts, and particularly in urban school districts. And lately, the conversations have changed to, Mr. Dormer, we're so appreciative, but we're tired of hearing all the problems. We want to hear solutions. And my response to them is, solutions require money. Full stop. It makes a tangible difference. Funding makes a tangible difference in the lives of our students, in the quality of the programs, materials, and supports, and environments that we can provide, as well as the volume of opportunities that we can provide to our students. Funding makes a difference in the lives of our children, and truly in all of our collective lives. As we've already mentioned, on February 6th, Governor Shapiro shared his 2024-2025 budget address and what he called a bold new vision for Pennsylvania. I applaud the governor for proposing yet another historic investment in funding for public education. Most importantly, he recognized and validated the 2023 Basic Education Funding Commission report that proposed a way to adequately fund public education, and his budget includes a significant investment, a first step, to achieve that adequacy. As Dr. McGarry indicated, $1.1 billion proposed in the next fiscal year. I proudly stand with Governor Shapiro on this momentous proposal, and I will advocate loudly, proudly, and strongly to see this budget come to fruition. But as Dr. B. Coates said, it's just a proposal. Budget negotiations are beginning in earnest, and I encourage everyone to stay involved and to maintain a focus on who will benefit from an increase in state funding. Our children. This is what it's about. Our kids, our students, and our scholars. These negotiations should not focus on a political agenda or some abstract bucket of funding. $1.1 billion sounds great, and I appreciate Dr. McGarry and Dr. Beacock sharing those tangible examples about what we can do with that, how we can impact kids, because it's about human beings. You know, our biggest cost of school districts are salaries, and we need more human beings to do the work. That's where the funding goes. Increasing state funding will allow us to educate each and every child, to help them learn and to grow, to become the best versions of themselves and truly ready for life. I want to highlight two areas of the proposed budget that will help public schools better meet the needs of each and every child. Those two areas are the proposed increase in special education funding and the proposed savings from cyber charter school tuition reform. Special education costs have grown exponentially over the past decade. Districts have struggled to keep pace with the rising costs to make the legally required services detailed in each child's individualized education plan, or IEP. It'll be another press conference on another day when we advocate for the federal government to meet their fiscal responsibility to legally fund IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the 40% that they owe us. They have only ever funded it at 15%, by the way. So part of the reason we're in what we're in, and the reason I mention that, is each local school district has been forced to raise local property taxes to meet that funding shortfall. It's significant that the governor has proposed special education increases to help close those gaps and meet the needs of our exceptional learners. Every child deserves to get what they need and a high-quality education in all of our districts here in Pennsylvania. In Norristown, that additional funding would be used to hire additional autistic support teachers, additional paraprofessionals who can meet individual needs of our high-need, low-incidence students, and additional school psychologists to support our multi-tiered systems of support, or MTSS process, and special education programming, and will allow us to invest in intensive intervention instructional materials that allow students, each child, to accelerate their growth towards proficiency and mastery. I think it is noteworthy that Governor Shapiro included in his budget proposal, including cyber charter school tuition reforms and savings into the budget. Again, another press conference would go into the hours we need to reform Pennsylvania's outdated charter school law. So much has changed in education over the past 20 years since that law has been in place, and the charter school law has not kept pace. The proposed changes to cyber charter school tuition recognize that those schools operate differently than traditional brick and mortar schools and do not have the same operational costs. The establishment of a statewide tuition rate is an important first step. Fund their actual costs. I'm not saying, because we have students that go there too. Every child deserves high quality education, but they don't need all of the dollars that are being driven to provide a high quality education through that mode of instruction and programming they do. Do not overpay based on the outdated law that treats cyber charters the same as brick and mortar schools. It also addresses another significant issue as cyber charter schools serve different students from multiple school districts. So I'm going to use a little bit of a different example to explain this, because I know we talk about a tuition rate that Norristown pays and William Penn pays in Upper Darby, and people seem to get lost in the numbers. So let me see if I can make it a little bit more understandable. So imagine you walk into your favorite restaurant and you order a hamburger, and you're charged $6 if you live in Upper Darby. But somebody else walks in behind you and orders that same hamburger and gets charged $15 because they live in a different zip code. That's exactly what is happening with cyber charter tuition. It's the same burger, but where you live determines what you pay. Different payments from different districts, but the same core educational program being offered. It should be one cost. It doesn't cost $9,000 more to educate a child in Lower Merion than it does a child in Norristown that goes to the same cyber charter school. Those savings would, the proposed changes to that flat tuition rate would generate over $270 million statewide. Dollars that can be reinvested in our local public schools, again, so that we can spend dollars and meet the needs of each and every one of our children who have, quite frankly, been forced to do with less for too many years. I'm grateful that the conversation around education has shifted from what is fair to what is adequate. State budgets and even our school district budgets have attended to collective buckets that have become too abstract and too detached from the heart of the true purpose. When we consider adequacy, Norristown will still be the 28th most underfunded in the Commonwealth when using Dr. Mark Kelly's adequacy gap analysis that he presented at the Basic Education Funding Commission. But the focus shifting from collective dollars is shifted to the needs of each and every child. So what does it mean in Norristown? Each child, their adequacy gap closes by $7,000 per kid. Think about what you can do with $7,000 more to meet the needs of each child. It is staggering. Again, funding, solutions require money. I'll close with something that I recently heard from my dear friend and colleague, Mr. Stephen Rodriguez, the superintendent of the Pottstown Area School District. Let's not talk about lifelines until we get our districts off of life support. This budget is an important first step towards that. I appreciate the time to talk on this issue, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Maria Edelberg, the Executive Director of the Delaware County Intermediate Unit.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McGarry, for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My colleagues on this panel have spoken very passionately about the proposed budget. I'm going to really focus on the proposed budget for two areas: career and technical education, as well as early childhood education. I want to thank our esteemed legislators here today to be part of this press conference. We know your advocacy at the state. We appreciate your advocacy at the state. We just need to keep the pressure on so that all legislators see investing in this budget is investing in our future and our children, the most precious commodity, the most precious thing we have in this country, in this state, and in Delaware County. I do want to kind of also thank board members who are here today. Ms. Mitchell is part of the Upper Darby School District, but she's also part of the Delaware County Intermediate Unit. There's other board members whose tired advocacy is also going to help move this forward. They really dedicate their time, their energy, their knowledge, and their support to make the world better for our children. I am going to advocate passionately for the 24-25 Governor Shapiro's budget. It is a plan that prioritizes our future of our state by investing significantly in education. Let's start with career and technical education. Now, at this point, there's a $2.4 million proposal to increase funds for career and technical education. Career and technical education helps to prepare our youth for success in the workforce, in industry, or if they want to further their education in college. It provides hands-on practical experiences, and we know that our labor market is struggling right now to find highly qualified workers. Career and technical education is one of those solutions. By investing in career and technical education, we are able to increase and continue to provide and expand programming for students who want and have a passion for this type of education. Now, this year, the Pennsylvania Association of Career and Technical Education Administrators estimate approximately 20,000 students across our state were not able to access career and technical education for several reasons. One, somebody talked passionately about funding for our buildings, but there's just not the physical space to continue to expand. Even when you continue to expand, we still have the challenge of finding individuals to teach. Teachers in career and technical education come from the workforce. Think about it. An electrician might be making $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year. The salaries for teachers are starting at $40,000 and $50,000 a year. Increased funding helps to support our teachers, helps to support our kids, and helps to support our workforce. In career and technical education, the level of equipment that is needed is very expensive. Yes, there's some equipment grants, but increasing career and technical education funding really allows our technical schools to ensure that they have top quality equipment so that when our students leave our technical schools, they can walk into any type of industry and be able to know what the equipment is, know how to use the equipment, and they're also coming out with the ability, in some ways, to help others within the industry because they've had the experience to learn on the latest equipment. Also, increased funding for career and technical education is going to provide more opportunities for dual enrollment, pre-apprenticeship, and apprenticeship programs. Additional funding to career and technical education equips our students with the skills and knowledge needed in high-demanding industries. Ultimately, okay, and this is really important, investing there allows our state's economy to ensure a brighter future and to ensure the infrastructures that we know we need to invest in have the people to work those infrastructures. Also, the governor's budget has a proposal for additional dollars for early childhood education. In Delaware County, just give you a kind of a sense of, we talked about how many students are in various districts. The intermediate unit, the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, provides programming for about 4,000 children under the age of 5. These early years are so critical for laying the foundation for lifelong learning and success. And it's imperative that we invest in early childhood education to ensure every child has the resources and supports that they need to fulfill their potential. The governor proposal includes $30 million for pre-K counts and Head Start supplemental assistance programs. These additional funds will help to stabilize the workforce, improve class size ratios, and support the commonwealth youngest children. It also will help to provide a sustainable wage for our instructors in early childhood education. That range in salary that work, a lot of these individuals will be in there at 6 o'clock and leave at 6 o'clock. But the average wage is about $27,000 to $32,000. Think about that. We're putting these incredible individuals working with our most vulnerable and precious children. We need to increase their salaries, and part of these dollars will help with that. Also, when we look at pre-K counts, the current proposal is to increase the per child from $10,000 to $11,000 for full-time students, and also more dollars for the Head Start program. Right now, when we look at a lot of the ratios, it's a ratio of 1 instructor, 1 support personnel, to 20 children ages 3 to 5. That number is too high. These additional dollars will help to support some reduction of the instructor ratio with students to, again, bolster and continue to provide high-quality education to the youngest of our students. One of the things that I think is really also important, these funds will also help other educational agencies and or preschool programs to increase the number of slots that our children can access for high-quality education that is provided free of charge. Another big component of the budget is a $17 million increase for services of special education, early intervention services. And, I think one of our colleagues talked a lot about what you're seeing in the increase in schools. Well, we're seeing that same thing in Delaware County and across the state. We know that the level of services that are needed for our preschoolers, just like in school age, we have seen such an increase in the need for mental health, for supportive services of instruction, speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, behavior interventions, vision, hearing supports. This is really necessary for our children to thrive and our children to enter school ready to be able to access education. Just for Delaware County Intermediate Unit alone, we have seen a 30% increase in students entering our early intervention program. These are 3 to 5-year-olds. In the 21-22 school year, we service 2,160 children with special needs. This year, we are anticipating serving 3,083 students in special education. These are 3 to 5-year-olds. The $17 million will go a long way. I would like to say it's not enough, but we can advocate for that on another day. We also know that special education services at the preschool level have a significant impact on a child's ability to learn new skills. We also know that we have students who, when we get them early, might not need additional services when they enter kindergarten or when they enter their early years. And so it's so important from kind of not only an economic standpoint, but to provide services when kids are young. It really does have a cost savings, and the return on investment is huge for our state. So investing in both career and technical education and in early childhood education is just not about a budget. Okay? It is about investing in the future of our children. It's investing in the future of our families. And it will make our state and our nation a better place. It is about giving our children the tools that they need to succeed, regardless of their background, regardless of their circumstances. It's creating a more equitable and prosperous society for all. I wholeheartedly support the governor's budget proposal. I really hope that the community and individuals advocate with your legislators, because we have voice and we have power when we use that to help our legislators understand how this budget supports all of our families and our children, and in the future will make us stronger. Dr. McGarry and my colleagues and legislators, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I think you have incredible advocates sitting here today, and I do believe our voice, collectively, individually, will help hopefully move this budget forward. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to all of the board members, administrators, parents, and community members that are in the room today, looking at the union presidents who are sitting very proudly in the front row, and everyone who has given so tirelessly to this effort to fund our public schools. I know Dr. McGarry is super passionate about this work, and I know that because I sit on appropriations, and during the appropriations budget hearing for education, we were on text with one another for about 3 hours. Back and forth about different questions that folks were asking that we were both infuriated by, because we know the backbone and the grassroots works that we have all done to help this school district and the other school district, William Penn School District, that I proudly represent, and the Norristown School District, who is represented here. When I think about the concept of basic education funding, I think about my own family, about how we started off, 2 educated parents, thinking about where we could live and pay our taxes and have a good, solid public school education for our children. Now, we know that every parent has a choice, and choice for public education feels like a scary word, right? But we know that every parent, when they bring children into the world, should have a choice. But the choice should start with the constitutional right for them to receive a good public school education. Anything beyond that is the choice of a parent, and it should be respected. But at all times, where you live, no matter where your zip code is, you should be afforded the right to raise your children and provide a public school education for them. The problem that we've had now is that when we move into school districts, parents are faced with the fact that they may not be able to afford a mortgage there in a school district that can give them that good public school education. So parents are often faced with, I can afford this mortgage, but I don't want that education. Therefore, putting pressure on parents and families to look elsewhere. And we know that when we have strong public schools, it means a stronger economic base and a stronger democracy for our communities. So when I think about the concept of basic education, all of the things that all of the superintendents just reviewed are extremely important. They are under an immense amount of pressure, along with our school board members who we know are elected officials who live in the community that they continue to fight for. That I must add, in the state of Pennsylvania, are free elected officials. They are not paid, and they give their time day in and day out to fight for this cause. I want to share a couple of things briefly because I know my colleague needs to speak as well, and I don't want to talk over her. But I must say that I, along with Dr. Edelberg, was ecstatic when Governor Shapiro announced the $1.1 billion that would go into education this year. We know that there's a lot of work to do before we can get this passed. But I want to share with you, we have a rainy day fund, and all the superintendents know what that means sitting up here. And the school board members, we have a rainy day fund, which is our extra money that if some catastrophe, crisis, or the other happens, that we can dig into, like the 95 when it collapsed, right? We need that money. Just like when something happens in a school building here, you need that money. So we have $14 billion sitting in our rainy day fund. Now, folks are like, they're going to spend that. We're afraid that they're going to spend that. $1.1 billion in education is a worthy investment. And we need to spend that because we need to catch up here in Pennsylvania for what we are. I heard the union president speak at a legislative breakfast, William Penn School District last week, talking about some of the very concerns that we know are coming up in the legislature that will gut public schools. Gut. And she used that word gut, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it'll do. It'll just gut what we've been working so hard to do. When I think about the concept of basic education, I think about my own children who have been successful. I have a college graduate who will then be graduating again with her master's degree on May 5th from Penn State University. I have a son who's down in Florida getting his mechanical engineering degree, and I still have a child here in the Upper Darby School District who will be entering high school next year. So when I think about that journey, I think about the concept of basic education funding and my basic education right. I know that Governor Shapiro is investing in education at every level, but we've been flat in some of the investments. I know that we are advancing Pennsylvania's economic development and competitiveness through our education system. We know that he's also proposed incredible investments for the social determinants of health here in our districts, like Upper Darby and William Penn and Norristown that we know matter to us when we are trying to educate our children, like food security, like mental health services, like housing and neighborhood revitalization and safety. These things are very important. But I leave with you the idea that we are working extremely hard in the legislature. I sit on the Education Committee, and I'm proud to do so. We talk about things all the time to make education in Pennsylvania move forward. But I'm proud to announce that House Bill 1331 with my colleague, Representative Danielle Frill-Otten, we came up with a student teacher stipend that was passed in the House last June and was sent on to the Senate in June of 2023. We are waiting for that to be passed because what that does is what some of you talked about. We are no longer asking teachers to have a free training. I mean, they pay for their training. It should be paid training. Every other internship that I know about is pretty much paid. It might be a small stipend, but what my colleague and I proposed is a program that pays teachers $10,000 to be able to further their education to become good teachers. This is to help the pipeline because we know the pipeline is in severe danger of just breaking off. And so we can talk about 1.1, but if we don't fix the pipeline, we are going to be in trouble. So we know that that's a bipartisan effect. We had it passed in the House. I just asked my assistant, 141 to 62. So that means it was a bipartisan push. So when you're out there advocating, keep advocating, because we know that we are trying to have a bipartisan effort to get this budget passed. We are proud to stand in the legislature as former school board directors and parents right here in this district to be able to get this budget passed because it makes sense. It's a budget that is going to impact our districts in such a way, our districts down here on the southeastern side of the Commonwealth, but not only that, our rural districts that many people don't talk about, where there's no access and very little money. I thank you, Dr. McGarry, for having this important press conference today. I thank all of the superintendents and the school board directors and everyone out in the audience and who are watching that do this important work. Specifically, I'm going to call out and shout out Children's First, who stay on that advocacy constantly. And I thank you for reminding us the things that we need to do, but not only the things that we need to do, the way in which we need to educate our colleagues in the House and in the Senate to get this work done. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleague, my friend, Representative Heather Boyd.
Oh, thank you, Representative Curry. First, I would like to say, hello, my name is State Representative Heather Boyd. This building is amazing. I had an opportunity to serve on the Upper Darby School Board for a few years, and I never got this. So I truly am enjoying this. Just want to take that for a minute. But obviously, before I was here at the school district, I was a mom, right? My kids have been my first priority. And I remember I was a public education advocate when my children were little. I stood on the Capitol steps holding their hands, ages 2 and 5, and advocating for basic education funding. They are 13 and 16. They're in the 7th, one's at Drexel Hill in the 7th grade, and one is at the high school in 11th grade. My 11th grader will have his entire public education underfunded. His entire public education has been underfunded. I know some of you have kids already graduated whose entire kids' public education has been underfunded. So I think about, I just came from a Women's History Month event with 5th through 8th graders at the Darby Township School. I have the opportunity not just to represent Upper Darby, but also William Penn and Southeast Elko, 3 of the most underfunded school districts in this state. And I got to stand in front of those young women and say, what would you tell your younger self? And one of the things I said to them, and that I still say to myself, is sometimes you got to do what's hard because it's right. And if you have to do that, surround yourself with people who also will do it with you. And I feel blessed that we've had such a strong advocacy group here in Upper Darby with my school board directors, my good friends, Rachel Mitchell, Kimberly Glenn, I see Neil Desnoyers, Ed Brown, of course, former school board director, Gina Curry, former school board director. And we've had the honor of being able to stand, sometimes being the only people in the room who have kids in underfunded public schools. Sometimes Representative Curry and I are the only people, even among our Democratic colleagues, right? They all fight for the same thing, but they're not all experiencing the same thing. So I have often felt very happy to have my colleague Representative Curry in that room, and also to be able to think of this group. I see so many faces of wonderful public educators and wonderful advocates. When we heard the governor give his speech, when we were sitting in the halls, the main rotunda, which was lovely, the governor said $1.1 billion. I screamed. I mean, you could have heard, like, that room was echoing with screams, because all of you remember the $1 billion cuts 2 governors ago that we are still feeling the pain from. It is still hurting us. We know that those cuts have hurt us and hurt us and hurt us and hurt us. So I hear that number and I'm excited. I'm going to vote for it. If it's in front of me, I'm ready to say yes. We have to commit to the 7-year plan. We can't just $1.1 billion isn't going to do it all. It sounds like a lot. It sounds like a good, excitement to do all the things that these wonderful administrators and educators are ready to do with it. They are ready to hit the ground with it. But we have to commit to the 7 years or we're going back to court. We're all going to end up back in the pain of it. And the thing that has been incredible to me is we focus so much on the kids, and that's important, obviously. Our kids, like we said here, are the most cherished people in my family. But the taxpayers have been hurting too. The inequity has hurt us all. You all live, whether you live here in Upper Darby or Southeast Elko or William Penn, you still pay state taxes. And less than 80 cents on the dollar of what you pay comes back to us. There are people paying your state taxes right now. It's March. We're all paying our taxes now. They're getting more than $1 in state investments in their schools and their infrastructure. It's not fair. It's not fair to the taxpayer. It's not fair to the kids. You all, these school board directors, have squeezed ourselves, have said we invest in public education because the state wasn't doing it. The state has to do it, and they have to do it for 7 years. You have strong advocates right now in your state representatives who will continue to fight for that. And sometimes we have to be the voice, even within our own caucus, to keep us on the straight and narrow, to say our public education is worthy of our investment. This is not spending, it's investment. Think about the jobs that this budget will create. Those people will pay taxes, and they'll pay taxes on a higher salary. That's coming back into the coffers of the state. This is not just spending, it's investment. And it's investment in the most important things that our state can invest in. So I feel honored to be in those rooms. I feel honored to have the opportunity to continue to fight as an advocate, from the days that I stood on the Capitol steps as a mom to being a school board director here in Upper Darby to now having the opportunity to serve you as a state representative. And I will continue to do that. And when this budget is in front of me, I'm pushing for it.
I want to say it's really unfair to have to follow all these amazing speakers. Thank you. I wrote a speech and I noticed after listening to everybody, I hadn't written like an introduction of myself or anything like that. So it goes without saying, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you everyone for being an advocate for public education. My name is Don Fields. I'm president of the Upper Darby School Board. I'm a graduate of Upper Darby School District. Father of 3 boys, men, 32, who are 32, 24, and 15, with one wife all the way through. I have to tell people that or they ask. So here's one small reason why, maybe it's not such a small reason. One small reason why public education is important to me. Public education is a shared experience. Nearly everyone in this country has attended a public school. And in a country with so many divisions, shared experiences are critical. We don't have any public service requirements in the U.S., so public education is as close as we get. But due to a lack of funding, that shared experience is radically different from one district to the other. Because our district, these districts, are not adequately funded, our administrators, our staff, and we as a school board are forced to spend so much more time just treading water, just trying to get through each week. During the pandemic, this district was granted enough funding to upgrade our ventilation systems, provide a Chromebook to every child for virtual instruction, and make many other one-time investments in facility and technology upgrades. We were also able to hold the line on tax increases. Instead of 2 or 3% increases, we were able to keep them at 1 or 1.5%. What would it look like if instead of receiving that money due to a once-in-a-century global pandemic, this district and others like it were able to get the appropriate level of funding every year? I'll tell you what it would look like. The first thing we would see is that more people would choose education as a career. Currently, the 5 worst paying jobs by mid-career wage, so what you make halfway through your career, are all in education. This would explain why Pennsylvania is graduating 12,000 fewer educators than it did 12 years ago. Once teachers are better paid, our staffing would be appropriate for the number of kids we have in this district. We wouldn't have to compete with our wealthier neighboring districts for talent. We would start each school year completely staffed. We would have smaller class sizes and more choices in curriculum. Our teachers might even actually have adequate prep time. A foreign concept these days, I know. As much as we do for our kids now, and believe me, we do everything we possibly can with the resources we have. We could do even more. If school districts didn't have to focus so much on advocacy, they could spend more time and effort on education, on developing ways to better serve and teach our kids. No one in education chose their career, so they could spend their time in DC or Harrisburg begging for more funding or have press conferences. They got into this industry to serve the public, to serve the future of their community, to make a difference. The one thing that gets in the way of making that difference is funding. Year in and year out, we are forced to make tough choices because of poor funding. This funding is a game changer for the entire Commonwealth. Making investments in public education will provide benefits that we all can enjoy. So here's the ask. Locally, our state reps and state senators support this increased funding 100%, and I thank them for that. What we need is for people in all communities to reach out to friends and family across the state and have them ask their state reps and state senators to support this funding. I want to add one more piece to this ask. I'd like these state reps and state senators and private citizens that don't think we need this funding to take some time to speak or have a coffee with not only Reps Curry and Boyd and Senator Carney, but also Superintendents Becote, Stormer, and McGarry, as well as our teachers. Find out from the people that are on the front lines what this work is like when we don't have the funding. It will be an eye-opening experience. And I look forward to seeing you here. Thank you. With that, I'll turn this over. See, it wasn't long. All right. With that, I'll turn this meeting over to Dr. McGarry for some question and answer.
Just before we close, thank you, Don. Just before we close for any Q&A and turn it over to our union leaders for a comment, I just want to make sure that we are clear on the message we wanted to convey today. And that is that public education is one of, if not the top service provided to every local community, not just here in Delaware County, not just in the Commonwealth, but throughout this country. How is it possible? How is it possible that there's still an argument over funding the very laws and rules that are passed at a state and federal level? Remember, they're passed at a state and federal level. The non-existent list of examples that I provided you here today and we talked about here today, they were not invented by teachers, administrators. They were not invented by Board of School Directors or local taxpayers here in the Upper Darby School District, the William Penn School District, Southeast Elko, Chester, Upland, or Norristown. They were not. They were not invented by us. Yet we are left with a daunting task of finding out how, through complicated and complex and creative ways, to find solutions that often leave our communities feeling like their children are missing out on opportunities for after-school programming, participation in bands, sports, clubs, dual enrollment, right? Recruiting people to this profession. We are pit against one another. It is an annual vicious cycle that weakens trust and relationships with our staffs, our students, and most importantly, I'm sure that Eric and Chris would agree, there isn't a day or a week that goes by where we don't get some nasty email from a constituent talking about the kids, talking about the behavior, talking about test scores, talking about their taxes. No one wants to see those things happen. Without funding, without meeting kids where they are, without providing those opportunities to our teachers, it is not for lack of effort. It is because they're missing out on the very foundational basic needs in our schools that at one point in time agreed upon constitutionally would be funded, and they are not. So we're left with this question. Why not us? Why not Norristown? Why not William Penn? Why not Upper Darby? Why not Chester Upland? Why not Southeast Elko? Why not us? Why not fund facilities improvements? Why not fund teacher recruitment? Why not fund dual enrollment opportunities, school safety, mental health, everything that everybody agrees that people need to succeed, the basic floor, the basic opportunities in this country? Why not us? Why not support the kids in Upper Darby, William Penn, like I said, Chester, Southeast Elko, Norristown? Public education is in need of additional funding, and this need did not happen overnight. As I stated when I started my comments here today, I've been advocating for funding in public schools in the Commonwealth for over a decade. I believe Representative Curry, Representative Boyd mentioned funding cuts of 14 years ago now. I remember I was a victim as a young administrator of those cuts, so much so that it led to a play. I participated in the development of a character in Children's First school play. I remember going home as an assistant superintendent and being begged to take back the cuts that we had to make because people were showing up at my house, showing up at my kids' sporting events. At that time, there was no outlet other than to cut programs, to cut educational opportunities. And at that time, the ripple effect is felt today. You can't hire a social worker. You're struggling to find a family consumer science teacher, a foreign language teacher, guidance counselors, special health supports, because 14 years ago, they were deemed as things you could cut, called low-hanging fruit. And as a result, those programs and universities are pretty much gone. There is no funding for those. And here we are just 14 years later, and we're all scrambling to try to find those supports and resources that no longer exist. Funding and a lack of funding have long-term significant implications for the communities and the kids we serve. There is a reason that teachers and administrators are leaving public education, and that the number of young people interested in pursuing education as a profession continues to rapidly decline. Year after year, public educators have been asked to do more with less, yet meet every single new challenge. We look around, and some people are off on Fridays going to a 4-day work week, or have much more bonuses or different pays. That doesn't exist in the world of education. We get up, we go to work, we answer every single phone call, every single day, 7 days a week, 24/7. That's what's happened to public schools today. The overall lack of funding has left education facing perhaps its greatest challenge. It has nothing to do, believe it or not, with test scores. Because I get that email every day, the test scores. You have to have good people, you have to have the funding, and naturally good facilities, and guess what happens? Test scores go up. In the communities that are funded properly, their student achievement is high. I wonder if there's a direct correlation with funding and student achievement. I think every teacher that works in William Penn, Upper Darby, Norristown, Chester would get great results, just as great results as anybody else, if they were given the same funding, resources, and supports. It is frustrating to get the emails being compared to other places, and people have no idea what goes into opening and running the school districts that we run on the panel here today. If we do not act swiftly, we will not be able to staff our classrooms with high-quality teachers who inspire our students to reach their fullest potential. Just last night, I had the privilege of watching Ms. Boyd's son participate in musical opportunities after school last evening. We have unbelievably talented people giving their time to make sure that kids have things to do after school. It's hard to do that when you have to work second and third jobs. We have a tagline in Upper Darby. You walked right through it when you walked into this room. Opportunity, unity, and excellence. It's not a joke. Our goal in the Upper Darby School District is to provide every opportunity for all of our students to be unified in their ability to pursue excellence. Adequate allocation of funding will assist in removing barriers so our talented and dedicated teachers can support students in reaching that goal, that tagline. I've witnessed firsthand the power of collaboration. My hope is that we can continue to work together to put children and their needs first. Every child deserves the opportunity to reach their fullest potential and make their dreams and aspirations a reality. We need the funding. Why not us? Happy to take any questions that anybody should have at this time. I know that our reps would like to make a comment as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Fink. I am the president of the William Penn Education Association. That's the teachers union in the William Penn School District. And this is my colleague, Linda Fox. She is the president of the Upper Darby Education Association here in the Upper Darby School District. I would like to say that the teachers union and the superintendents, we are on the same page. I'm going to say that again. The teachers union and the superintendents are on the same page.
We always are here in Upper Darby.
We've always been that way.
Governor Shapiro's budget proposal takes a historic first step towards fixing our unconstitutional public school funding system. Pennsylvania's students have waited decades for policymakers to take bold action to address the significant needs in their schools. They cannot wait any longer. We must act. We call on lawmakers from both parties to work with the governor to take this important step forward, putting students from William Penn, Upper Darby, Norristown, and students across this commonwealth on a more level playing field. This work is not optional. It is required by our state constitution and by the Commonwealth Court. Our focus should be on fixing our unconstitutional public school funding system. The last thing we should be talking about is sending hundreds of millions of taxpayer money to private and religious schools. Some policymakers are pushing for a private and religious school voucher program in Pennsylvania. Voucher programs in other states have been a bait and switch. Policymakers present them to taxpayers as helping students from low-income communities or underperforming schools, but they quickly morph into costly programs that disproportionately benefit wealthier families with kids already enrolled in private schools. Instead of sending hundreds of millions of Pennsylvania tax dollars to private schools, we should focus on the significant needs in our public schools, which educate 90% of Pennsylvania students. We must focus on what's most important, fully funding our public schools and providing a thorough and efficient system of public education to every student. Thank you.
piggybacking on that, I'm just curious, maybe what the state reps might want to say about that part of the proposal that would give money to religious and private schools. If that's a necessary evil to drag this thing over the finish line, or you'd like to see that carved out as negotiations continue.
Well, I will say that in the last budget, when this was on the proposal, the entire Democratic caucus on the House side was against. We stand unified against vouchers at this current time, and I would like to see that continue. I personally would have I can't even say a hard time. I don't think I can vote for vouchers at all, but I do understand that there are members who would need to, negotiate. That's going to be incredibly hard for me. I don't see an opportunity where I could ever vote for vouchers. And I hope that that's just not going to be in the negotiation this year. And that's our hope at the moment.
Rep Boyd is a little bit more positive than I'm going to say. I think people always want to stay out of politics, and I think this is politics. And as she said, we're going to fight not to have to do that, and I think our leadership will as well. We know it's very ugly right now up at the top because we passed over 200 bills in the House, and they're sitting. They're just sitting at the Senate. And so we are really hoping with this budget that it won't get ugly to the point where they're have us up against the wall to negotiate things that are very necessary for the Commonwealth, where we have to give up something else. And sometimes that's what happens, but we can definitely say that our caucus is working extremely hard to preserve what we know is going to be best for children and all of the districts that have spoken today and more. So yes, your question is a tricky one, but it's live and in person, because these are the things that we're going to be faced with in June as we try to pass this budget.
If you don't mind, if I could follow up with that from a superintendent's perspective, and I appreciate both of your advocacy there, and we've talked around about it. I know that's that bait and switch, that conversation that came up. I guess this is one of the asks to comment back to that. When I listen to the hearing and the testimony and the questions that are coming up, it's this idea for the last 14 years of competitive grants. This isn't competitive grant. This will be in basic education funding. Always in public education, something's tied to this nasty word of accountability and paperwork. And unnecessary accountability, unnecessary paperwork. So I guess as superintendents, one of our asks would be for you to advocate, because I know we have to get something across the finish line, and we hope that happens. We are held to a standard where those dollars would go. They're not. They're not held to the paperwork. They're not held to any of the list of things that I just rattled off, and that's not even the exhaustive list of mandates that we have, that the dollars flow to us, that our teachers, our administrators have to follow. So once again, it's confusing. If the dollars are flowing into private and parochial funding, and they have different, much freer use of those dollars, and I hear at the hearing, if we give you this money, how are we going to hold those schools accountable? Well, we're naked, proverbially, every day with our test scores and our discipline. It's out there for the whole world to see, right? It's out there constantly. We're being compared to each other, and I don't want to see another more affluent school district feel like they're getting less. Good for them. The question I have is, if the money is going to go from public to private, why don't they have to follow the same rules? They should have to follow the same testing, the same paperwork, the same requirements as public schools. And if the platform is level and we're following the same things, maybe it's less of an argument. But clearly it sounds like a backhanded way of walk your way out of the rules that were established that maybe were poorly established.
Dr. McGarry, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think as a member of the Appropriations Committee, that's something that we talk about all the time, is accountability. And there have been some acts put in place for higher education where, they have to report back and things of that nature. But we are fighting for the charter school accountability right now, because we know that's not going to go away, right? It's not. But you're absolutely right. When it comes down to this specific issue, we definitely need to put accountability regulations in place, because of what you said. You know, the raw facts are our public education are put out there on a slab to pretty much bleed out. And we know, as I said when I spoke, parents have a right to choice. We can't deny parents a right to choice. They're their children. But the fact of the matter is we have to uphold our constitutional right to have basic education funding and a basic right to education.
And I just want to echo that I agree wholly with you on this accountability piece. We do already have lots of state dollars that go into private and parochial schools, and we do need more accountability on the funds that are already there, let alone any additional funds. We also need to, I guess, acknowledge that there are going to be people who want vouchers. There are going to be people who want them, but the court case doesn't say anything about private and parochial education. It says this state is required to fund a fair and free public education. And that's going to be our priority from start to finish. And we're going to need to have a single focus on that, not just this year, but for the next decade, because this is not going to just be this year. This fight is going to continue, but the Constitution doesn't say we fund a private education. It says we fund a public education, and that's what we're going to continue to fight to do.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Go ahead if somebody else has a question. There's a microphone. I see one here and then one here.
Hi, thank you all so much for your leadership fighting for our kids. I had a question for the superintendents. I know in the last few years, you all did receive some additional funds that were temporary through ARPA from the federal government. Can you give us an example of something that you were able to do with those funds, whether it was staffing or a program, and how did that impact your district, and how might we expect to see similar changes with the governor's budget?
I'll take the first crack at this and just let you know that just to be clear how that there were guardrails to the spending of that money. And when you get that money, there's also auditing. A lot of strict auditing and paperwork, and it wasn't as if that money was given and do what you think is the best. There were some stipulations with that money, one-time costs, and then whatever you put in place, you have to figure out how to carry that through moving forward. And that's the concern. You're hearing a lot about what's called a fiscal cliff. There might be a time where there's a fiscal cliff. Here in Upper Darby, we put those dollars into improvements, infrastructural improvements for technology, tried to make some of those one-time costs so that there wouldn't be a tax burden moving forward. I would be remiss if I didn't add that we did put in place trauma experts, conflict resolution specialists, professional development for our staff in those areas, curricular enhancements, moving toward resources that could provide online opportunities for children. But a lot of our work and effort went into additional mental health supports and services coming out of the pandemic, and then other infrastructural supports that would be one-time costs that would last us several years, that would not have a direct long-term impact on our budget. Having learned here in Upper Darby, when the reps mentioned stimulus dollars that were cut out of nowhere in the middle of the year or the end of the year, we built a framework around how we slowly build into maintaining those projects. But mental health, people, qualified good people in the area of conflict resolution specialists, trauma-informed specialists, those areas are most concerning moving forward. How will we maintain them? We wrote some grants here in Upper Darby. There was a list of PCCD grants that came out. We're going after to try to sustain some of the additional guidance counselors and supports that we have in place. But I would say that's how our dollars went into play here in the Upper Darby School District. Eric and Chris?
Very similar to Upper Darby, we spent a large portion of those dollars on HVAC improvements at 2 of our elementary schools. One of the things with some of those dollars, though, you could only spend a certain percentage of those dollars for improvements such as that. So if that stipulation was not there, we probably could have touched more schools, but that's going back to the stipulations that we had with some of the money. We did implement a new curriculum for math and science, and we also utilized those dollars for mental health support. And what we are also now doing is writing grants for PCCD, similar to what my colleague just mentioned. That's how we will continue some of those efforts.
I do want to make sure everyone is aware that superintendents, when those ESSER and ARPA dollars started to flow, we received a letter from a certain state senator that cautioned us about not investing those dollars in recurring costs because the money will go away, I think was the kind of the intent of that letter. So a lot of the, so while those dollars were great in terms of the things they talked about where, there was infrastructure things for us, it allowed us to, for a district that wasn't one-to-one, to be able to make sure that every student has advice, and we were able to, put in the infrastructure to sustain that, to get some much-needed mental health supports in place through contracted service. Couldn't hire our own because, again, I wasn't going to bring teachers on or therapists on and mental health counselors on to have to furlough them again because we were told the money's going to go away. Don't use it for recurring costs. But we were very, very proud to expand, during the years, academic supports, expanded summer programs, mental health supports, infrastructure, investments. One thing I do want to mention, though, is, the past couple years where we have seen state increases, smaller than what we're talking about this year, how they've been getting put to good use. In Norristown, we've been able to hire back, and Superintendent McGarry talked about, the 14 years ago, and the cuts that we all went through. I think I was still in Upper Darby here, and remember got called into an office and said, find 27 teachers that need to go in this budget year because we can't afford them anymore.
And reduce your credits.
Correct. So, where we talk about, these investments are over the past 3-4 years have been great, but we're still digging out of, we're climbing, really we're on the rungs of a ladder, climbing out of a deeper hole that we dug ourselves. In Norristown, we've been able to then put back the sustainable things. We've hired 80 additional staff in the past 3 budgets, smaller class sizes, counselors, you name it, programs are going back. And unsurprisingly, we just celebrated with smaller elementary class sizes, and we were able to invest in new, rigorous PA core line math curriculum. We had a 10 percentage point gain in math proficiency in year 1. So to me, when you talk about where these additional dollars go, we know how to spend one-time money. The biggest pieces of this is we need sustainable revenue so that we can attract people, we can retain them, we can invest in programs, because like you said, we're not going to dig out of this in 1 year. This is going to be a multi-year journey that we need to sustain our children over a generation. And Rep. Boyd, to your point, I went to an event in Pottstown last year and actually apologized to those students. I met with the 11th and 12th graders about the lost opportunities they've had because they've been underfunded their entire lives. And we have an opportunity now to change that for the generations moving forward.
Yes. Hi, my name's Tony Rigoso. I live in the district here, and I'm one of the guys that sends nasty emails. But I'm not here today to be critical. I came here to be educated, and I've been educated. I have 2 comments. One is that there are a cross-section of people in the township that don't learn about these meetings. I only learned about this meeting because my daughter gets an email from the school district. And that cross-section of people would get behind this if there was a way that they could find out. Now, I know a lot of people who I can, transmit this information to, but it's limited amount of people. So I know mailing would be impractical. That to me is a non-starter. But I don't know what availability you have to local newspapers that would report on this and communicate the urgency, because it sounds like a pretty urgent problem to me. To communicate the urgency of the situation so that everybody could hear about it and get behind it. And my second question is, you want us to put pressure on somebody, some bureaucrat, whatever, whoever controls all this. Our reps are behind it. I don't know about our state senator. I guess he is too. He, she. And who do we communicate with?
Yeah.
I'll go third.
That's somebody that's going to feel the pressure. I mean,
Well-
it'd be pointless to write to them because, they know. I mean, they're behind it.
Thank you for that. I will say that Representative Curry and I represent Upper Darby together, and that's, I agree, we were trying constantly to outreach to folks. There are a lot of our members who need to stay on course that their districts aren't getting more. There are districts neighboring us that are not excited as much about this as we are. Just people who who live in districts just west of us or in Chester County or Montgomery County, they're not gonna be as excited about this as we are, because they understand that when you address the inequities, their school districts haven't been inadequately funded. So in some of this is going to be talking to the people about this, because their reps aren't, whether they are supportive of it in concept, some of them are going to be faced with doing the right thing for us and perhaps not being able to continue in their own role if that were to, hurt their own districts.
And I don't want to be a hog with this microphone, but everybody is affected by this situation.
Absolutely.
And the one argument that will stick with everybody is that if you don't get behind it, your taxes are going to go up.
That's right.
Wherever you live, whoever you are, your taxes are going to go up.
That's right.
And if somebody from Lower Merion hears that, or somebody from Jabip hears that, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute, what is this all about? But then again, it comes down to, they have to pressure their own local people to support what you folks need. And so I go back to my original question. Who do you communicate with?
Well, I held a basic education funding info session a few weeks ago, and Rep. Curry and I would like to do that again together so that we can reach more people. I will just say that she and I are on the ballot this year, so we are in what they call blackout period. We can't communicate with the district until after the primary, but that is something that we would like to do.
Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. So when I said people in this community need to reach out to people and across the state, and I say that because Reps Boyd and Curry, like every elected official in Pennsylvania, they listen to their constituents first. And so, whereas you or I or any of us could call the state senator for Altoona, he knows we're not going to vote for him, right? Because we can't. They're on board though, right? But when you reach out, if you have friends, family, colleagues, I have a work colleague that lives in Shikshini, PA, and I never heard of Shikshini until I met this colleague. It was amazing, and that's like fun part. But I can have a conversation with her to talk to her state rep, her state senator about getting behind this, because as you said, right, very clearly, her taxes will go up too, right? If we don't get this done. So that's the kind of conversation that you're at. It's a big ask, but it's a big thing we need to get done. So that's the kind of conversation you can have.
First of all, Mr. Rigoso, I appreciate you coming out, and I know we've had many back and forth emails, and I appreciate, you're a taxpayer. You have every right to be concerned and expressing what's going on, and I'm sure that my responses back are often met with maybe a thinking of like it's deflection from what's going on at times. And the reality is we are functioning as an ecosystem, and this is a concept I think is really important, so that when, William Penn and Upper Darby catch a cold, right? People know that there's a cold in that community, and they're going to want to go somewhere else where they're not going to be sick, for lack of a better term. And so when you don't fund Philadelphia, people in those communities say, you know what? I don't want to go to school where asbestos or lead is a problem. I should be able to drink out of the water fountain and not have a fear. So you know what? I'm going to find out how to get out of here to go to a place where I'm going to get a better education in a better community that perceived, no disrespect to them. And then they'll work their way to Southeast Delco, Chester Upland, William Penn, Ridley now, Interborough, Upper Darby, right? And so what I would argue, and I think your point is valid, your taxes are going to go up somewhere else. If you don't fund William Penn, you don't fund Norristown, you don't fund Upper Darby, because people know that they want to go to places where they're going to get safe water when they drink out of the water fountain, not have to worry about asbestos in their buildings. They're going to have a teacher that's going to be there. Over the last couple of years, there's been a 40% increase in teacher absenteeism. If you think about that, here in Upper Darby, that means a kid in elementary school has had a teacher out 30 days. 30 days of a 180-day school day. A year. That's pretty substantial, and then there's no fill rate for that, right? Why does that happen? Because the amount of folks that are working here in these schools are teaching 28, 27 kids of such a range of needs, where in another community, the needs are much closer together and you're paid a lot more to work with those closer needs. Well, those kids in those communities are going to find out where they can go. They're finding out where to go to other communities because because when we're advertised, and I know you know this because you've emailed me, and Norristown or William Penn is advertised as not great achievement-wise. Well, families will see that, and they're going to say, I want to go somewhere else. And now those other school districts, because we're on calls, I take classes at Penn, I'm on a breakout session with superintendents. Our communities are changing. I hate that. Our communities are changing and we weren't prepared and we don't know what to do. And the reality is people will leave, they'll be transient if they feel like their needs are not getting met where they are. I believe tremendously that fixing our local school facilities, they become points of pride. The communities become stronger because you want to stay in the Aronimink neighborhood, the Hillcrest neighborhood, the Garriford neighborhood, because it's a strong school. It's a strong community. They've got a good playground. They've got a good gym. They've got a water fountain that I won't get sick if I drink out of it, right? I'm staying there and I can progressively move my way through it. It becomes more of a transient situation and the needs become more significant when Upper Darby, William Penn, and Norristown are competing to pay with another school district who's paying $115,000 a year to a teacher, right? That's what's going on. And then we're compared the same exact way. So from a communication standpoint, we have direct relationships with the news. This went out to the news. It will go out to the news. We're more than happy. I'm more than happy to do any kind of small town halls, breakout sessions that exist. But the reality is until somebody else feels like they're getting sick, this is just a fact in public education. Until somebody else feels like they're getting sick, it doesn't matter in my community. It's like if you read Elie Wiesel's Night. You know, Moshe the Beadle was good enough to teach your kids religious things, but when there was a fear that something was coming to your town, it was too dramatic. I can't believe it. But then when it hits, it's too late. And so what happens in public education is we're the recipient of other people making decisions. Then we get sick, and it's too late for people to buy into it. It's also too complex. All those acronyms that I just listed, no one wants to hear about that. The bottom line is kids have to be met where they are. There's $1 associated with that and a funding of a classroom teacher. And I think everybody would get behind this concept, to your point. The press does cover it, believe it or not. They've done an excellent job covering us over the last couple of years. It just comes down to the simple fact that people believe Lansdowne Avenue is this great wall that's going to protect anybody from moving into their other school communities, and it doesn't matter in my community yet. So why should I worry about Upper Darby? Why should I worry about Norristown? Why should I worry about William Penn? Why should I worry about Chester Upland? When in fact you should be, because it is an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is going to make its way everywhere naturally in this country, in these communities. And if you don't meet people where they are, your taxes are going to go up in other places.
So if I can chime in with a very tangible, because you asked, like, what can we do? Who can we talk to? And you're right. You don't need to contact Rep. Curry, Rep. Boyd, Senator Carney, because they're voting the way that we need to, right? Same way, like in my district, I don't tell my residents in our community members to reach out to Rep. Bradford, Scott Webster, Senator Capoletti. They're all voting for this. They're all supporting this. They're all about, we need the money, and we're fighting against those things which are going to drain dollars away. Leadership needs to hear from you. The governor, House leadership, Senate leadership, because at the end of the day, they're tasked with negotiating a budget for the entire Commonwealth. And while they don't, your vote is not going to make or break them getting reelected, that's part of their responsibility to negotiate a budget on behalf of the entire Commonwealth. And they need to hear the stories. I'll tell you, I've grown a very good relationship with House Education Chair Pete Schweier up in Allentown, who is another, Pete's awesome. Pete lives in Allentown. His kids go to Allentown Public Schools, which is right up there with all of us being an underfunded. And Pete's biggest thing is come with solutions and tell your story, because it helps us, because I think sometimes the reps, when you're trying to do statewide work, they get tired of hearing from, and I know Matt's cautioned me about that. He goes, I can only bang the drum in Norristown so much because Bedford County can't understand what Norristown's problems are. But when you're trying to negotiate for the entire state, the story of Norristown is important. The story of Upper Darby is an important one because the budget has to support 500 school districts across this Commonwealth. So the leadership is where you can influence, and they will take your calls. They will listen, and those stories will help them when they go sit down at the table. So that would be my very practical advice is who to call. Call the governor, call leadership, call the heads of appropriate education, because they're the ones that are responsible to come and lead those negotiations as we go down the finish line towards the final budget.
You can also call every committee member on appropriations. Seriously. So you can go onto the House website and the Senate, Pennsylvania House website and the Pennsylvania Senate. I'll look forward to your email. I'm on Approps. Approps heads, it's fine, Chairman Harris, but if you hit everybody on the Approps team, on that committee on both sides, and you get people to hit, on both sides, the whole committee, then that's where we start to, we're like, wait a minute, we're getting harassed, and I'm not looking for harassment, but I'm just saying that seriously, I mean, we get those emails all the time, and there are reps who really take it to leadership to say, this is what's happening, we need to pay attention to this. That's why we're on that committee, really. So, and I'll talk to you afterwards.
If this could be elevated somehow to a statewide problem, as opposed to an Upper Darby School District problem, and statewide, I go back, nobody wants to pay taxes. I don't want to pay any more taxes. Nobody in this room, I'm sure, doesn't want to pay any more taxes. I don't know how you elevate this to a level that citizens in townships that have good schools are going to say, you know what, wait a minute. These people aren't getting money. They should be getting money. Their citizens' taxes are going up. If they're not getting money, that means there's going to be a shortfall somewhere. It could be everywhere. So maybe we all ought to get behind this and start putting pressure. But it's got to be at a state level. And I'm sure you don't have that kind of dough to throw around to do that. But maybe you could get together with people and put on some sort of statewide.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Gill. We do, and Chris and Eric and I can certainly talk about, and we'll push out to you guys. There is a statewide effort plan to advocate for this, and we'll share that with the public as well. Yep, and it's about our efforts and our manpower. We can do it, believe it or not, without there being like a huge cost of it. Well, I just want to say to everybody up here, the superintendents, the state reps, Board President Fields, Dr. Edelberg, thank you for the teachers that are here, the community members, the board members, my administrative team that's in the back of the room. I appreciate it. The press, thank you for covering it. We're not going to give up. As Chris had said, a couple of years ago in a Penn class, I took this idea of tell me your story. If you can share a story and put yourself in that story of someone else, and that person's willing to listen to your story and attempt to put themselves in your kind of life, there's points of intersection where we're all agree that there's common things that we would benefit from, right? No one wants to see their taxes go up. I think we would all agree to that. We want safe, supportive schools. Education is the bedrock of this country. Why would you argue against that? Here in Upper Darby, we started a process where we're collecting stories from our teachers, from our community members. We started, and it's out for the public. It's anybody in our community can add to. How does funding make a difference in you? If you want to share your own personal educational journey, how education and educational opportunities meant something to you, right? Who are you? How did education impact your life? How did being in a school that was funded properly change your life? And how a lack of funding and what you're seeing changed your life? We have stories. I'm giving these stories to my state reps so that when they go to Harrisburg, they're going to read them and they're going to say, forget hearing from Dr. McGarry, Dr. Bicos, Chris Dormer, or President Fields. These are real people who have children in the schools. This is their story. They want ADA accessible doors and bathrooms in their schools. They want to have a building where a kid can get to the second floor. That's what I heard at a home and school meeting. Common sense stuff, right? They want to drink out of a water fountain without the fear of it having lead in it, right? Simple concepts. Our band was here the other night. They want to have money for the music program to support extracurricular opportunities that should never go away from kids, right? So real stories of advocacy so that when somebody comes to the microphone and says, why should we give the money to you, right? And why is there a need? These are the needs that will keep kids out of trouble, keep your taxes low, because we all agree, right? This is the story we should say that nobody wants to share. Kids who don't have a good education and don't have anywhere to go after school, they get into trouble. And when they get into trouble, your taxes go up. Right? When kids don't get their needs met in pre-K, first and second grade, and by third grade, you know what happens? Your taxes go up. Because every time a kid's educational needs are not met early and young, the cost to educate them goes up 50% more by 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, right? Those are facts. Those are the things that maybe we should just rip the Band-Aid off and tell the truth to people. These are the things that are going to get in your way. There's going to be a fight after school because the kids feel like their needs are not being met. That's going to drive down your home value, drive up your taxes. They're the real things that I think we should maybe talk about even more. So I'll get off my soapbox and say thank you to everybody for being here today. We can go on about this forever. Thank you so much for your time and for your advocacy, and get out there and tell your story to us if you want us to get this money here for our schools. Thank you.